Just when you start to think that maybe we can relax because jihadis are finally realizing that terror isn't the way forward, they emerge from their evil lairs and go on a bunch of killing sprees. Here's the latest. Syria. The debate over the Trump administration's decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria has reignited after the deaths of 4 Americans in a suicide attack. 2 U.S. service members, a defense contractor, and a Defense Department civilian were killed in an explosion in the Syrian city of Manbij. ISIS claimed responsibility for the attack. Both GOP and Democratic lawmakers renewed their appeals to the president for troops to stay in Syria until ISIS is definitely defeated. But the White House said the attack won't reverse Trump's decision. There are about 2,000 U.S. troops in Syria. A global coalition has been fighting Obama's JV squad for years, and ISIS is still blowing things up. I'm beginning to suspect that the tiny minority of extremists isn't so tiny. Kenya. The death toll rose to 21 in that terror attack at a hotel complex in an upscale section of Nairobi, Kenya. At least 30 others were hospitalized in the coordinated attack, in which an unknown number of gunmen set off bombs, barged into a hotel, and started firing. 50 people were still unaccounted for yesterday after the siege that lasted for hours. Authorities said all the attackers, suspected to be from the terror group Al-Shabaab, were eliminated. Among the dead was American businessman Jason Spindler, who had survived the 9/11 terror attacks in New York. Spindler worked at the World Trade Center in 2001. He was late to work on September 11th and was just coming out of the subway when the first plane hit. Now he's been killed in a completely different country by a completely different terrorist group because that terrorist group follows the exact same prophet as the group that launched the 9/11 attacks. Egypt. In recent weeks, hardline Islamic extremists have carried out a spate of attacks against 4 churches in Egypt. Persecution watchdog International Christian Concern has reported all 4 churches were in the midst of seeking official recognition from the state to carry out worship services. Following protesters' demands, Egyptian authorities closed down the churches and denied Christians the right to carry out public worship services. The Copts were in Egypt long before Muslims were. Here we are, nearly 14 centuries after Muslims conquered Egypt, and Muslims are still shutting down Coptic worship services. And yet, if you say Islam promotes religious intolerance, people will call you a racist and a bigot. The article continues. According to the Archbishopric of the Church, police promised demonstrators they will close down the church and stop Christians from worshiping. A statement issued by Archbishopric of Al-Minya and Abu Qirqas reads, more than 1,000 militants demonstrated against the church, chanting offensive and inflammatory statements in the presence of security forces. They asked them to calm down and promised them that they would do whatever they wanted to remove the people, i.e. Christians, from the place and close it. Police officers arrested the church's priests, transporting them in a car used to carry animals and garbage. Well, it makes sense for Muslim authorities to transport priests in a car used to carry animals and garbage, since the Quran declares that Christians, along with Jews and idolaters, are the worst of creatures. Surah 98, verse 6. Verily, those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, the Quran, and Prophet Muhammad, from among the people of the scripture, Jews and Christians, and al-mushrikun, will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures. Christian priests, like Christians in general, are lower than dogs, according to Islam. Why shouldn't they be treated as such? Here in the United States, we have a Georgia man was arrested Wednesday on suspicion of planning a jihad attack on the White House, other high-profile national targets, and at least one Jewish site in the nation's capital. Hasher Jalal Taheb was taken in after a year-long FBI sting operation that grew out of local authorities' fears that the 21-year-old Muslim living in Cumming had become radicalized, changed his name, and made plans to travel abroad, according to a criminal complaint filed Wednesday with a federal court in Atlanta. The Joint Terrorism Task Force initiated the case after receiving a tip from the community, B.J. Pack, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, said in a statement. The attack was supposed to come Thursday, and the complaint states Mr. Taheb was arrested immediately after picking up the planned weapons: 3 semi-automatic assault rifles, 3 explosive devices with remote initiation, and 1 AT-4, an anti-tank rocket launcher. According to the criminal complaint, Mr. Taheb told an FBI informant in October in a meeting in Cumming, about 40 miles north of Atlanta, that he wished to conduct an attack in the United States against targets such as the White House and the Statue of Liberty. Taheb made the classic American jihadi blunder. He started blabbing about his plans to FBI informants. If he had kept his falafel hole shut, there would have been some sort of massacre. Why? Because so many followers of Muhammad read Islam's most trusted sources and misunderstand their religion in exactly the same way. If only Allah and Muhammad had clarified that when they ordered their followers to violently subjugate the entire world, they didn't really mean it, countless lives could have been spared. But since Allah and Muhammad are, according to our Muslim friends, the absolute worst communicators in history, constantly shouting violent commands that no one is supposed to take seriously, we have to keep reading about people being slaughtered in the name of Allah. But don't worry, Islam is, by many accounts, the world's fastest growing religion. We can join our politicians and reporters in assuming that once Islam reaches its critical global mass, it will magically transform into something more peaceful and tolerant. And if it doesn't, well, we'll all be killed or subjugated or converted. And what's the harm in that?